Hey, y'all. Thank you for joining us today for our recording since I am out. So, we're talking about life in the 50s, although life in the 50s kind of backs up a little bit, obviously, into the late 40s, the post World War II timeframe. So, what do we have going on here? So, we have President Truman holding a newspaper saying that he lost a race. What's happening here? What do you think? Take a minute to think about that. Hit pause. Okay, now that you've unpaused, what do we have? So the race in 1948 was so close that the Chicago Daily Tribune assumed Truman was going to lose his reelection bid. We know that Truman took over after FDR died in 1945. He finished FDR's term. Truman's running for his full term. And because of World War II adjustments, like we talked about, guns versus butter coming back after the war, the economy wasn't doing so well in the late 40s. But unlike what the newspaper says, Truman actually won. So this would definitely be a big error, right? So here Truman is celebrating his actual victory. Um, so there was a split, and the big thing that happened in the Democratic Party was that Democrats, Southern Democrats, were upset about racial issues. And so there's a split. And those Southern Democrats, they become the Dixiecrats, as they're kind of nicknamed, right? Dixie is a name for the South. And so Truman, being from the North and being somewhat supportive of civil rights, they're not going to like that. And so there's a near defeat for Truman, but Truman does emerge victorious. Now we'll talk more about those Dixiecrats. They will be around for a while, and they will eventually defect and become Republicans. But this initial tension is due to civil rights and issues about civil rights. And so we see that here, right? Here's Truman's victories in the North. Now, Truman was still winning some southern states, some Democratic states like Texas, which, if you look at today, right, you're thinking, oh, that's a little different. But look at those orange states, the Deep South. That's going to be where that tension was. I should say, let me go back. Those Dixiecrats were voting for Strom Thurmond, who was a Southern Democrat, a Dixiecrat. Okay, so when we think of the 50s, right, we think of bustling, life getting back to normal, suburbs, all these, big things happening in the 1950s. So that'll be kind of our course of discussion today. So the economy improves because so much of Europe and the world was bombed out from World War II. The US becomes a manufacturing powerhouse. Half of all the world's goods are manufactured in the United States. That's very different than today, right? Today, we don't make many things in the US, but back then we did. Inflation is brought under control. People had been forced to ration. Remember when we talked about World War II, we said you cannot buy a new car because General Motors and Ford, they were making military vehicles, right? Well, now that that rationing ends, people want to buy stuff. So the economy is roaring. Not just cars, but things like refrigerators, for example. You couldn't get those. Consumption increases. We have more and more white collar jobs. So those are like the professional accountant, management, sales types positions. As right as the business grows, you're going to need more of those jobs. But we also have franchises formed. We get the first McDonald's. If you haven't seen the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton, it's about the founding of McDonald's. So that one definitely worth checking out. It's not just McDonald's and big businesses in food because of franchising, but we have things called conglomerates, and that's when one big company owns a bunch of smaller companies. So here's an example today of Procter and Gamble, right? So when you buy any of those products, even though Charmin is a toilet paper brand and Bounty is a paper towel brand, right? And Love's and Pampers are two different diaper brands. they're all owned by the same company. And so we start getting businesses consolidating and becoming larger and larger. Today, right, you know that Disney owns what? They own Fox, they own ABC, they own ESPN. So it's kind of a modern day media conglomerate. Like we said, consumerism grows. You're keeping up with the Joneses. That's a saying where your fictional neighbors, the Joneses, maybe they get a new car and you start looking at your car and you think, maybe I need a new one too, right? Or they get a new shiny lawnmower and you want one too. That's possible because for a lot of people in the US, they do have money to spend. They have extra money now that they did not before. These are people who would have been maybe in their teen years and their 20s during the Great Depression. Think about that. They were getting by with nothing in the Great Depression. Then they're rationing during World War II. And now finally they're free of either economic catastrophe or a global war catastrophe, and they're able to spend. Now, some products have this thing called planned obsolescence. You might know, right, that your phone does not last forever. It's not even just the battery, that if you eventually get the battery replaced, Apple will stop supporting your iPhone, whatever, right? An iPhone 10 doesn't work anymore, for example. So, same kind of deal with products back then. Maybe dishwashers were designed to break, right? To wear out after 6 or 7 years. That's another way that companies keep you buying. Not good for consumers, right? But I guess it helped businesses out. Some of the new products, Tupperware, plastic was invented right before World War II, but it's used during World War II, but it becomes a consumer good. Before plastics, think about how much different your kitchen would have looked. Where would you store food, right? What did drinks come in, right? They came in glass bottles. So that's one change. Televisions, although they were around in the 40s, nobody could afford them. They were like a very niche thing that a few super wealthy people had, and that was it. But now, all of a sudden, people are able to buy televisions. Check it out, a 12.5-inch screen. Oh my gosh. Gathered the whole family around, right? Big screen movie night. Fashion changes. Now, this is actually a critique of Soviet fashions that was in a magazine, which is kind of funny to look at. Transistor radios are invented. Before this, radios were big, huge pieces of furniture like the size of your desk. But with smaller electronics called transistors, people are able to have smaller, cheaper radios. Now you could have, before the 50s, you had one radio that sat in the living room and that was it. Now you could have a radio in your kitchen, in your bedroom. Eventually, they'll be in cars. Crazy, right? All these new things that are coming out. Shopping malls become a thing. People are like, hey, instead of going to a downtown area and bouncing back and forth, walking down the street during maybe bad weather, let's put all our stores under one roof and let's make a shopping experience where you don't have to get wet, right? You can stay inside in the air conditioning in the hot places and do all your shopping in one place. There's all sorts of, if you want to pause this and take a screenshot of this recipe, there's these funny things. But like fruit salads, Jello salads were a big thing in the 1950s. I actually made this one time when I taught brick and mortar and took it to my class. So it's like clear gelatin and mixed veggies. Would you eat that? We tried it. It wasn't bad. I mean, it's, I guess, what you think it might look like, but it was, it is what it is. But that was a big trend in the 1950s. Like we said, new appliances. Here we have washing machines, and we saw some ads before last time. We have new refrigerators as well. The big thing to know about during this time is the baby boom. You hear the term boomers, right? Okay, boomer, right now. But the baby boomers are the generation that were born right after World War II ended. I think we mentioned this in class last week that, right, people had put their lives on hold during World War II. They might have gotten married while they were on leave or before they went, the guy went off, to serve in the military. But then they come back and people start having babies in 1946, like literally 9 months after the war ended and GIs came home, babies started being born. And they had a lot of babies. And that generation, right, think about childbearing years, is going to go for about 15 years. And so people born from 46 to 60 or so are called the baby boom generation. Just in the first 6 years after World War II, 25 million babies are born, which are huge numbers. So much so, like, where do you even put them in the hospital? And this is going to have an effect on everything. Think about it, right? What will you need more of when you have more babies? Hit pause real quick and think about what would you need more of? Okay, thank you for unpausing. Childcare items, right? Cribs, diapers, pediatricians, gonna have to build more kindergartens, right? More elementary schools. All of these things happen. This is showing population growth rates over time. It's about the same today. It's dipped a little bit lower as we get to into the 2020s. But look how many people, look at that spike after World War II. You also see some big declines. So you see a big decline at the end of World War I when the Spanish flu started. You also see a big decline during the Great Depression, right? Those are probably times when people would not be thinking about having children or not having as many children. That changes in the time frame after World War II. So that spike starts right under the first B in baby boom, and it goes up to the M at the end of baby boom. That's the whole baby boom generation. You might have seen in geography population pyramids, but this is kind of interesting, right? What this is showing is left and right. One side male births, one side female, not just births, but population. So we can see that in 1960, so by the time the baby boom was winding down, right, those first baby boomer babies were 14 years old. That's the top of the three pink lines we see, right? And then the youngest of the baby boomers are in that 0 to 4 age range. But look how much bigger that was than the rest of the population. Look at the people in their 20s, right? Those are parents that did not have children during World War II or did not have as many, right? That was the Great Depression and World War II that were not being born. With any country, you usually see, right, more births, and then of course it gets narrower at the top, but sometimes you have these bulges. So we fast forward to 1990, the pink, we've gone forward 30 years. Well, now those baby boomers are adults, right? They're in their late teens to their mid 40s. So they're doing things different, right? We said before you had to have baby supplies and stuff, right? Well, now what's happening in their time? They're buying houses, they're getting married, right? So they're going to need other things. They're going to be investing money in the stock market, right? Now, if we switch to 2020, what happens? The baby boomers, their retirement age. So that gets into things we talk about today, right? Is Medicare sufficient? Are they having to build more independent living and assisted living places, right? Is medicine more focusing, right, on treating the elderly? So it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. One thing that you kind of see in this one, if we go back to the 1990s, if you look at those kids who are from 0 to 9 years old, you see they're slightly bigger there, right? That's because those 0 to 9-year-olds are the children of the baby boomers. So that was kind of an echo of the baby boom. All right, so we're going to end with that today. We're going to think about some effects, and then we'll continue more with life in the 50s when we return for class on Wednesday. Thank you all for watching. If there's anything you need, as always, make sure to call, text, or email me. Take care, y'all.